hello, everyone. My name is Chetter Galloway. I'm a professional storyteller here in Atlanta, Georgia. A little bit about me. I'm the youngest of 11 children. There are 6 girls and 5 boys. And on Sundays, my dad would take us on a Sunday road trip. He's the one I credit with giving me the ability to tell stories. We'd all load up in the Galloway family limousine, also known as a 1972 Fleetwood Cadillac, and my dad would tell us stories as we drove along in the country. I actually had a game I used to play in the car. Long before child safety laws, I would sit on the armrest in the back and wonder how far I would go forward when my dad would stop on the brakes. Would I go to the back of the seat, over the seat, or unfortunately, maybe go to the windshield? Needless to say, none of those things happened, especially the windshield. And my dad, we just loved the way he told stories. In fact, one of the ones he told us on those road trips, I still share today. It's called The Talking Skull. It's a cautionary tale about a man who talks too much and winds up losing an important part of his anatomy, his head. And the moral of the story is, don't say all you see and don't tell all you know, lest you end up a talking skull. Now, the first time I can recall sharing a story was with my family at the family reunion. And I actually learned the story from a storyteller, professional storyteller named Lorraine Johnson Coleman, because my background is in folk tales and folklore. And she told a story about the devil, Miss Lulabelle, and a Sunday church hat. And in the story, she outsmarts the devil so that she can get her church hat to wear to Sunday school. Now, why I share that story is because you find it all throughout the South. And Lorraine Johnson Coleman, the lady who told the story, she put her own characters and people from her community in the story. So when I shared it, I put my family members and my place of residence where I lived in the story. Like my parents, they've been married 50 plus years, so they were put in the story. My dad went to church at a place called Chapman's Chapel in his hometown of Vanceboro, North Carolina, which is where I set this story. And my point for doing that is that when you hear a story that someone has, folklore particularly, and you want to share it, you make it your own and adapt it to your own stories and your own style and your own needs. And I've been doing that for over 20 years now.
Wow, that's amazing. Well, it's really cool to hear how everybody that's been involved so far has a very different take on how they got into stories. And so thank you so much for sharing that. I really appreciate it. That's fantastic to hear. And so when you think about performing and sharing stories with an audience, do you remember the first time you got on stage, whether it was at a Moth or Toastmasters, or and how getting in front of an audience for the first time made you feel? Do you remember?
I remember the very first time. I can't recall. However, I do recall the very first time I did a personal story. I was actually living out west in Portland, Oregon, and I got connected with a group called the Portland Story Theater, and they focused on personal narratives and personal storytelling, much like the Moth does. And I was telling a story about a friend of mine who unfortunately passed due to HIV. Now, he was a photographer, and photos were his way of sharing stories, because he had a saying, and that was, photos capture that one moment in time that you can't revisit. So as I was telling his story, I made sure that was mentioned. One of the things that I was concerned about was, telling so much about somebody, even though I was connected to them in the story. But how much should I reveal? How much should I tell about myself? And how much I'd be willing to go deep into the subject matter, that would the audience accept it? Would they appreciate it? Would they be open to hearing it? And I was very surprised at the reception that the story received, because it's amazing when people in the audience laugh at parts of the story. You're like, well, wait a minute, I was trying to be serious. And that broke the ice for me. I said, okay, they're with me now.
Yeah.
And from that point on, I felt more comfortable sharing personal stories, things about myself, and things I encountered watching other people through my travels.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, and my daughter and I have been coming to the Moth in particular just since probably July, and so that's one of the things that has really stood out to me is just the way the community really does embrace and is so supportive of whoever gets up there and whatever story they're telling. You can tell that they really are engaged and they really are listening, and it's such a shared experience. I think it's beautiful, and so we can remember, my daughter and I were just talking before you got here about I think one of the first times we went, we heard you tell a story, and just how impactful it was even to hear that, you know, from you. So it's beautiful. So I appreciate you sharing that. When you think about just the storytelling community in Atlanta or elsewhere, you know, whether it was before you came to Atlanta or did you spend much time in North Carolina before you came to Atlanta, or have you been here a long time?
I've been in Atlanta off and on for over 25 years. I moved here 1 year after the Olympics back in 1997.
Oh yeah.
Now, my parents' roots are in North Carolina. I was born in Suffolk, Virginia. And I've moved around quite a few places, but everywhere I found an opportunity and a place to share stories.
Yeah. So, I mean, I know obviously you've been here in Atlanta for a long time now, and when you think about the storytelling community in particular here in Atlanta, what are some of the things that stand out to you about that community and some of the ways that it's influenced you personally?
The receptiveness of stories, and over the years how the community has grown, and how it's become a space for, you know, your mental wellness, your well-being, and after long days at work, a way to hear a story that can make you feel a lot better about yourself, or that you can apply to your work when you go back into your job. There are also a lot of supportive organizations here. For example, I'm a member and president of Kaumba Storytellers of Georgia. We're celebrating our 30th anniversary this year. And we were founded back in 1995 by 7 local storytellers, and we're an affiliate of the National Association of Black Storytellers. So we share stories, and our mission is to perpetuate the African oral tradition and provide cultural awareness for the community and serve as a resource. But then there's also the Southern Order Storytellers, or Georgia Storytelling Network now, which has been around since the early 80s. When I moved here, those were the only 2 organizations of storytellers, but of course now the Moth is here. There's Stories Worth Sharing. There's also Carapace. So there are plenty of opportunities to go and share your stories and have that community support you when you stand up on stage. Yeah, that's amazing. That's really cool. I'm familiar with a couple of those, but a couple I'm not. So I'll definitely have to check them out. And we'll be sure after this video, we'll put links in the description at the bottom of the YouTube video, so that if anyone's interested in checking out any of the ones that you mentioned or that you're involved with, we'll definitely put those there so people can kind of figure out how to get involved or come and listen. And so that would be fantastic. So I appreciate that. Well, as far as the organizations that you're involved with here in Atlanta, I mean, I'm sure there are people coming around, new people all the time, and people that you're meeting who maybe have just been listeners so far, but who might be thinking, you know, someday I'd love to get up on stage and tell my own story. If you were to sit down with one of those people who has come and who's interested and who loves stories, but who hasn't yet got on a stage and told their own story, what main things would you tell them, or how would you encourage them as far as that beginning that journey? Well, I always tell you, to be a good teller, you need to be a good listener. So first, go to some storytelling events and listen to the types of stories. You can find someone there that you find connecting with, or a similar style of storyteller, and that will help you gain courage to get on stage. And don't worry about getting on stage stumbling or fumbling for the first time, because my philosophy is that your story should never be the same time after time again. It should grow, it should evolve. So getting up on stage for that first time, getting it out and telling it, it's like a test run.
Yeah, right.
And the reaction from the audience will let you know what needs to be perhaps adjusted or changed, and what worked well also.
Yeah.
Because as a proverb says, a stumble is not a fall. So even if you stumble through it and get to the end, you can live to tell another day.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, and I can speak from very limited experience. So my daughter and I have come, like I said, several times over the last 7 months, and I've thrown my name in the hat and got on stage, and I can very much affirm what you're saying. Like you're going to stumble. There's going to be moments where you feel like you're, okay, am I staying on track? But again, my experience, very limited experience, has been, people want to see you do well, and they want to encourage you. They want to hear your story, and so that's been my encouragement to people who've asked me. Yeah.
It's important to share, because you never know whose life you're going to impact with your story. You may get through 75% of your story and it seems like no one's connecting, but that last quarter, the audience is with you, and you'll hear a deep sigh or an ah or a ooh or something that clicks in them.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's all they need to take away with them from that story to have made a difference. And everyone in the audience is going to take something different away from the story. Someone needs to laugh. Someone needs to know I'm in the same situation as that person. Someone else needs to know I'm in the same situation, but my goodness, it's not as bad as that.
Right.
And that's not to look down on the teller or anything, but it's just to give them a realization that you can relate to and empathize with a person in a similar boat that you are.
Yeah.
And you've intrigued the audience when afterwards they're asking you questions about the story. Sometimes questions you don't plan for.
Yeah, right. Yes.
But which could be a good thing,
Yeah.
and also to challenge you on the spot too.
Yes,
Oh, I
totally.
didn't think about that, but it is good to know that it leaves them wanting more. And if they want more, then that's always a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and life is obviously one big journey, and there's so many opportunities to hear stories and to have stories of your own to share. And so I've just been really encouraged by you and by the stories I've heard you tell at the Moth, and I look forward to hearing more, and hopefully to be able to come to some of the other organizations and storytelling events that you're a part of. So I really appreciate your time and being willing to do this interview, Chetter. I really do. And so I'm gonna let you close this out. If there are any other things that you might want to share, whether it has to do with storytelling or maybe an upcoming event, or however you'd like to close this out, I'd love to hand it over to you to end it for us. So
Okay, well, riddle me this: what's the shortest story and what's the longest story?
What is it?
Your name, your life. Because every day, every minute, every second, you are creating a story. And it can be a short one, or it can be a long one, filled with many chapters. Hopefully we will have the latter.
Yes, absolutely.
Out of you.
Absolutely.
And I always tell people, go forth and tell your stories well.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, thank you so much, Chetter. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Yes, and we'll see you, I'm sure, soon.
Absolutely.
All right, cool.
Well, today, getting prepared for the interview today, I didn't know what to wear. And then it occurred to me, why don't you wear one of the first dashikis you ever bought for storytelling? And I found this blue one here that I bought actually in North Carolina when I was living there. When I was living there in South Carolina, actually, I would go to Charlotte to shop at the African stores, and I found this. This was my first African dashiki. It's about 28 years old.
Wow.
And still holds up.
Yeah.
And you won't believe how I keep it clean. I just throw it in the washer, dump detergent in, put the dryer on high, and for some reason or another, it still survives.
That's amazing.
So I always like to wear it in interviews because it's a testament of time, and to me, a testament of stories and a story in itself.
Well, I love it. It's beautiful. So, and being from North Carolina as well, I'm from Charlotte originally.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
the
and
Queen
so,
City.
Yes, and so the Carolina blue, the blue is my color. So I love it.
Yeah, and it's my mom would always call me Baby Boy Blue. Another reason I bought it.
That's really cool. That's awesome. Cool. Well, thank you.
Thank you.